Imagine Lagos in the late 1950s. The city is alive, restless and searching. Colonial rule is crumbling. Independence is approaching. Churches are springing up on every corner. Prophets are rising on every street. The air is thick with spiritual hunger, and into that hunger stepped one man who did not come as a prophet, did not come as a pastor, did not come as a healer. He stood up in front of a crowd in Oyingbo and said the most shocking words anyone had heard in that generation. He said, "I am Jesus Christ." His name was Emmanuel Olufunmilayo Odumosu, but Nigeria would never call him that. Nigeria would call him Jesu Oyingbo, Jesus of Oyingbo. And that name, even today, decades after his death, still echoes in Yoruba conversations, in old Lagos stories, and in a popular song that most Lagosians can recite without even knowing the full story behind it. So who was this man really? Where did he come from? And how did a carpenter from Ijebu-Ode convince hundreds of people that God had returned in human form? And that form was him. Emmanuel Odumosu was born in 1915 into a family that already carried the scent of the spiritual. His grandfather, Joseph Odumosu, was a well-known Christian traditional healer and writer of Yoruba medicinal texts in Ijebu-Ode. So Odumosu did not grow up far from the idea that ordinary people could carry extraordinary power. It was woven into his bloodline. As a young man, he trained as a carpenter, a detail that would later become very convenient for his claims. He eventually got a job with the Colonial Department of Post and Telegraph in Lagos and became active in the labor union movement during the historic 1945 general strike that rocked the country. After losing that government job, he returned to carpentry and opened a workshop on Lagos Island near Oil Mill Street. But things were not easy. Business was shaky. Debt was constant. At one point, he was jailed for 6 months on charges brought by creditors. From laborer to debtor, from striker to prisoner, nothing in his biography whispered that this man was about to declare himself God. But during those difficult years, something was shifting inside him. He began attending different Protestant churches across Lagos. He claimed he started receiving dreams and visions. In those visions, he said, God was not just speaking to him. God was telling him who he was. He began sharing these thoughts in small evening gatherings near his carpenter's workshop. People sat down to listen, and what they heard, they could not easily forget. By 1952, he had formalized these meetings into a religious movement. His early message was structured and disciplined. He preached about the battle between the natural and the spiritual world. He condemned alcohol, tobacco, and moral looseness. The congregation was small, around 30 people by 1954, but they were devoted. And then came June 1959. On that day, Emmanuel Odumosu stood before his followers and made the declaration that would define the rest of his life. He said, "I am Jesus Christ, the very one whose second coming was foretold in the New Testament. Those who believe in me will have everlasting life and joy. I am the missing, the Trinity. I have come to prepare the faithful for the judgment day." Lagos went into an uproar. Churches condemned him immediately. Critics laughed. Newspapers mocked. And yet, people believed. Not a handful. Hundreds. They came from across Lagos, drawn by his confidence, his authority, the way he spoke, the way he carried himself. And there were details that made the faithful lean in even further. He was a carpenter, just like Jesus was said to be. He had no formal education, yet he claimed sudden and complete understanding of the hidden meanings of Scripture. He said he was of the tribe of Judah, that he and his followers were simply Jews in dispersion, and that geography did not limit divinity. His movement, which he called the Universal College of Regeneration, set up headquarters first in the Oyingbo area of Lagos, which is precisely how he got the name Jesu Oyingbo. He later moved to Palm Grove and eventually to Maryland, Ikeja. But the name Oyingbo followed him everywhere, because in Lagos, where you start is where people remember you from. Now here is where the story gets layered, because Jesu Oyingbo was not running an ordinary church. He was running what you could only describe as a complete universe. When a new convert came to him, they were not baptized with water. They were baptized with 9 strokes of a cane which many claim he inherited from his grandfather. He called it the baptism they needed to enter the flock. After that baptism, something remarkable happened. These new members went back home, packed their belongings, said goodbye to their former lives, and moved into his communal enclave to live with him. Families tried to fight it. Police cases were opened against him. He walked out of every single one of them clean. Inside that enclave, those hundreds of people did not just pray together, they worked together. He built bakeries, including one that produced a popular brand called Good Luck Bread. He ran a printing press, a barbershop, a restaurant, a construction company, and real estate ventures across Lagos. Properties on Emmanuel Street in Maryland bore inscriptions like Merciful and Mighty, Prince of Peace, and Everlasting Father. The buildings were surrounded by statues of Christ, lions, caterpillar tractors, and mermaids with water spurting from their mouths. Visitors came and genuinely could not tell what religion was being practiced, because it was Christianity mixed with Islam, laced with traditional African religion, decorated with paganism, and powered by a very shrewd business mind. It was clear that his wealth did not come from his followers' offerings, but from his businesses, even though he accepted gifts and what he called his divine entitlements. And those entitlements, let us be honest about what they were. He claimed unlimited sexual access to the wives of any man in his flock. He openly admitted to it and framed it as part of his sacred duty as their shepherd. He married between 30 and 80 wives, the exact number impossible to confirm because of the communal structure where a member's wife could also serve in the capacity of his wife. Some reports formally list the number around 34 personal wives, among whom, disturbingly, 3 were his own biological daughters. His children numbered at least 80 officially recognized, though some non-biological members of the enclave adopted Odumosu as their surname, blurring the count further. When a journalist asked him in 1959 about his polygamous lifestyle when he already had 7 wives at the time, he smiled and said, "I have not finished with wives yet. I am going to marry more. To save the faithful, I must behave like one of themselves. I must marry more women, for are they not the sheep, and I the shepherd?" He also once married a member's wife as punishment for that member's bad behavior. On another occasion, he reportedly gave the wife of an unruly member to other men in the community. These actions would be reported to the police and he would walk free. On a personal level though, people who knew him described a man who was remarkably warm. His children and neighbors talked about a man who smiled constantly, cracked jokes while walking through the neighborhood, and never passed anyone without trying to bring them into his fold. Every evening, he would set up a projector and screen movies for his community and the surrounding neighborhood, turning his enclave into what felt like an open-air cinema. To those around him, he was genuinely charming. To his children, he provided cars and drivers and financial comfort. It was a strange and contradictory picture. A man who controlled and exploited people on one hand, and on the other hand, genuinely seemed to enjoy life and wanted others around him to enjoy it too. And that enjoyment was central to his theology. He once said directly, while the first Jesus came to suffer, carrying the cross and enduring the crucifixion, he, the second Jesus, had come to enjoy life. I have come to enjoy my life, my friend. He was not embarrassed by wealth. He was not ashamed of pleasure. He reframed excess as divine purpose. In 1961, some former followers had had enough. They went to a Sunday newspaper and called him a fake, a cheat, and a humbug. They also went to the police and accused him of refusing to release their share of a business worth £50,000 they had been running with him. When police searched his property, they found £5,000 in cash. Jesu Oyingbo walked through that scandal too. For nearly 3 decades, this went on. His empire expanded. His fame spread beyond Lagos into southwestern Nigeria. His name entered songs. His buildings stretched across multiple streets. He was, by any measure, a man who had built something enormous out of the audacity of one declaration made in a market-side neighborhood in Lagos. And then in January 1988, at 73 years old, Emmanuel Odumosu died in a private hospital in Lagos. Not inside his enclave, not surrounded by miracle, in a hospital. Like any ordinary man, the followers waited. Word spread that their Messiah had died. Surely he would rise in 3 days. That is what the original Jesus did. 3 days passed. There was heavy rain on that 3rd day, and according to some accounts, what followed was lightning and thunder that scattered the waiting crowd. There was no resurrection, no ascension, no miracle. The man they had believed was the risen Christ had simply died and stayed dead. What came next was uglier than anything that had happened before. Jesu Oyingbo died without a will. He left behind dozens of wives, at least 80 recognized children, and a property empire spread across Lagos. The war began almost immediately. Wives against wives, children against children. Long-term members of the commune who felt they had built this empire with their own labor and loyalty fought for their share too. The community fractured violently. His eldest son, Olukayode Emmanuel Odumosu, took the matter to court, and in those courtrooms, the full picture of what had been happening inside the enclave for decades finally came into public view. The sharing of wives, the incestuous relationships, the layers of control and exploitation that had been invisible to the outside world for 30 years. All of it came out. In 1997, the court ruled in favor of the children. The disciples who had been living in the Maryland enclave were evicted. And then, in June 2014, Justice Ronke Harrison of the Ikeja High Court ruled that all 1/6 recognized children were entitled to share equally in the vast estate. With that ruling, whatever remained of the Universal College of Regeneration fell apart completely. The few members still holding on left, Olukayode, who had spent years trying to hold his father's legacy together, finally let go and sought his own freedom. And today, on Emmanuel Street in Maryland, in a neighborhood that is otherwise orderly and well kept, the buildings of Jesu Oyingbo sit abandoned. Weeds push through the cracks. Dust settles on the floors. Statues of Christ and lions and mermaids stand surrounded by silence. Criminals use the compound as shelter. The empire has become a forest. There is a Yoruba song that most Lagosians born long after his death still know. It goes, Èmi ò mọ Jesu Oyingbo, Èmi ò mọ Jesu Agege, Èmi ò mọ Guru Maharaji, Jesu tí mo mọ lápáta ayérayé, which means, I do not know the Jesus of Oyingbo. I do not know the Jesus of Agege. I do not know Guru Maharaji. The Jesus that I know is the Rock of Ages. That song does not mock him exactly. It simply draws the line. It acknowledges he existed. It acknowledges the question he raised. And then it answers that question in the clearest way it can. That is the thing about Jesu Oyingbo. He was not just a con man. Though there was certainly deception in what he did. He was not just a cult leader. Though the structure of his enclave had every feature of one. He was not just a businessman, though his commercial instincts were sharp and genuine. He was something more complicated than any single label. He was what happens when charisma meets spiritual hunger, meets economic control, meets a city still figuring out who it is and what it believes. Lagos was changing, Nigeria was changing, and in the middle of all that change, one man looked at the crowd around him and decided that the moment was ripe to be God. And for nearly 30 years, a remarkable number of people agreed with him. That is the story of Jesu Oyingbo, the only Yoruba man who ever stood up in a public place and said he was Jesus Christ. Not metaphorically, not as a title, as a statement of fact. And the most fascinating part is not that he said it. It is that so many people believed him, and that perhaps is the question this story leaves behind. Thank you for watching Top 10 Yoruba. If this story shook something in you, please like, comment, share, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a video. On Top 10 Yoruba, we go deep into the stories that shake assumptions and reveal the full weight of our history. And few stories carry that weight